Everyone loves chocolate. We eat 9 million tons of it every year, almost half of it in Europe alone. And the amount keeps growing rapidly. Global cocoa bean production in 2022-2023 is estimated to be 4.9 million tons. The world's largest producer of cocoa beans, Ivory Coast, is producing an estimated 2.23 million tons in 2022-2023 alone, accounting for about 40% of the world's cocoa bean production. The Ivory Coast is also the world's largest exporter of cocoa beans, exporting an estimated $3.8 billion worth of cocoa beans in 2021, thus creating work opportunities for about 2 million cocoa farmers in the Ivory Coast alone, and accounting for roughly 15% of the country's GDP. The global cocoa industry generates an estimated $100 billion in revenue each year. However, despite the industry's significant revenue, cocoa farmers often earn low incomes. In some regions, they receive less than 6% of the final chocolate price. How is this possible? The sweet chocolate has a very bitter story. This is the bittersweet taste of Ivorian chocolate. Cocoa beans grow in tropical regions, mainly in West Africa, Central and South America, and Southeast Asia. After harvesting, the beans are extracted, fermented, dried, and roasted. The processed beans are then used to make cocoa products like chocolate bars, cocoa powder, and cocoa butter, which are distributed to supermarkets and retail outlets for consumers to buy. The Ivory Coast tropical climate, with its ample rainfall and warm temperatures, creates ideal conditions for cocoa cultivation. Most cocoa farms are small family-owned plots, with no big multinational closely monitoring a huge plantation, thus creating work opportunities for millions of local farmers. However, the local farmers face various challenges. Issues such as fluctuating cocoa prices, aging trees, and low farmer income often make it difficult for farmers to invest in modern farming practices and improve sustainability. The average yearly revenue for an average cocoa farmer in Ivory Coast is estimated to be around $1,000. Many young newcomers can even work for years in a row without any income whatsoever, hoping that they will be granted their own parcel one day, with which they can start making a living on their own. Ivory Coast contributes to nearly half of the world's cocoa production, and in order to face the increasingly growing global demand, the country has experienced a significant loss of around 94% of its forests over the past 60 years, with at least one-third of the deforestation driven by the expansion of cocoa cultivation. Deforestation is a crucial concern because without forests there is no rain, and without rain there can't be any cocoa plantations, therefore no cocoa beans, and therefore no chocolate. This is a vicious circle that can turn against itself in the near future, precisely because of its intrusiveness, lack of transparency, and lack of accountability. Can you imagine a world without chocolate? I definitely can't. Despite initiatives like the Cocoa and Forests Initiative (CFI), launched 6 years ago to address the industry's impact on nature, cocoa-driven deforestation continues to affect the forests of West Africa, particularly in Ivory Coast. Moreover, child labor has been a long-standing concern in the industry, with efforts being made to combat this issue through certification programs and increased awareness. One of the primary reasons behind child labor in the cocoa sector is widespread poverty among cocoa farming families. Many families in Ivory Coast struggle to make ends meet, and children often become essential contributors to household income. In some cases, children are brought to cocoa farms from neighboring countries or rural areas within Ivory Coast through trafficking networks. These children may be lured by false promises of better opportunities or may be victims of forced labor. The lack of access to quality education in cocoa-producing regions contributes to child labor. When schools are distant, underfunded, or unavailable, children are more likely to engage in farm work instead of receiving an education. While Africa produces the majority of the world's cocoa beans, consumption is highest in developed countries. In 2021, the global per capita consumption of cocoa was 5.3 kilograms. The highest per capita consumption was in Switzerland at 11.4 kilograms, followed by Germany and Belgium. According to a 2021 study by the International Cocoa Organization, developed countries consume about 75% of the world's chocolate, while underdeveloped countries consume about 25%. This is a significant disparity, and it is due to a number of factors. One factor is that developed countries have higher incomes, which means that people have more disposable income to spend on luxury items like chocolate. Another factor is that developed countries have a longer history of consuming chocolate, and there is a more established chocolate culture in these countries. Underdeveloped countries, on the other hand, often have lower incomes and a shorter history of consuming chocolate. As a result, people in these countries are less likely to be able to afford chocolate, and they may not have the same level of interest in it. This discrepancy in chocolate consumption reflects broader economic disparities and purchasing power between different regions and income groups. So how big is actually the gap between the rich and the poor in terms of chocolate consumption? This data reflects chocolate consumption per capita in developed countries, with Switzerland leading at 11.4 kilograms per year, and Indonesia at the bottom with about 0.2 kilograms per year. To understand the cocoa supply chain's benefits distribution, a detailed breakdown of the numbers is crucial. This examination helps us grasp each stakeholder's share more comprehensively. So who gets what in the global cocoa supply chain? As we can see, the majority of the business's share goes to retailers and manufacturers, followed by processing, farmers, marketing, arrival costs, inland and international traders and transports. It is obvious that the farmers, the backbone of this whole business, are left very little income. If your favorite chocolate cost $2 at the local supermarket, the cocoa farmer's share would be approximately 13 cents, representing 6.6% of the price. As seen in Côte d'Ivoire, where they earn around 78 cents per day, well below the extreme poverty line. Due to these low incomes, farmers may resort to using child labor to cope with the challenges they face and meet demands. To combat the concerns surrounding cocoa farming, major chocolate magnates like Mars, Nestlé, and Hershey have undertaken several measures to eliminate child labor, but progress has been slow. Organizations like UTZ Certified and Fair Trade are also working towards increasing supply chain traceability by selling only certified cocoa coming from farms that prohibit child labor. Ivory Coast and Ghana have recently introduced a fixed premium of $400 per ton, aiming to improve farmer livelihoods through the establishment of a cocoa union for the industry. The fixed rate, known as the Living Income Differential, LID, is designed to ensure that farmers receive a minimum price for their cocoa, regardless of market fluctuations. The LID is paid on top of the market price, so if the market price is $2,600 per ton, farmers will receive $3,000 per ton. The LID is funded by a combination of government subsidies and contributions from chocolate companies. The governments of Ghana and Ivory Coast have each agreed to contribute $200 million to the LID, and chocolate companies have agreed to contribute an additional $100 million. Despite these efforts, more action is needed to effectively eradicate large-scale child labor and alleviate poverty in cocoa's supply chain. The bittersweet challenges persist, demanding continued attention and action from all stakeholders involved. The cocoa market is projected to experience a 4.1% compound annual growth rate by 2025, driven by its diverse applications in various industries such as confectionery, beverages, pharmaceuticals, and cosmetics. The growing awareness of cocoa's benefits fuels demand across these sectors. The market is segmented into cocoa powder, cocoa butter, and cocoa liquor, with the latter expected to hold the largest market share by 2026. It's important to note that cocoa butter is primarily used in pharmaceuticals and cosmetics, while cocoa powder finds applications in the food and beverage industry, and their prices can fluctuate independently of each other. Even with stable cocoa bean prices, the prices of cocoa butter and cocoa powder can still vary based on demand fluctuations. To contrast its price fluctuations today, it's useful to note that cocoa was incredibly important to the Aztec and Mayan civilizations. It was considered a sacred food, and it was used in religious ceremonies, royal rituals, and as a form of currency. It actually used to be more precious than gold and silver. The Aztecs believed that cocoa beans were a gift from the gods, and they were used to make a bitter drink called chocolatl. This drink was believed to have many medicinal properties, and it was also thought to be an aphrodisiac. It was often served to guests as a sign of hospitality, and it was also used as a form of tribute to the Aztec emperor. Our exploration of Ivory Coast's cocoa production reveals a complex landscape of triumphs and challenges of this precious commodity. The significance of Ivory Coast as the world's leading cocoa producer is undeniable, and the journey of cocoa beans from its lush rainforests to supermarket shelves worldwide is awe-inspiring. However, behind this success lies the sobering and saddening reality. The numbers and statistics underscore the immense global revenue generated by the cocoa industry. Yet the reality is stark for the cocoa farmers themselves, who often receive only a small fraction of this income. Despite these challenges, hope emerges through sustainable initiatives that strive to protect the environment, eliminate child labor, and ensure equitable profits for cocoa farmers. By supporting ethically sourced chocolate and promoting responsible cocoa practices, we can contribute to a brighter future for both the cocoa industry and the people behind its cultivation. As consumers, we hold the power to influence positive change. Let us celebrate the sweetness of chocolate while cherishing the journey of cocoa beans from Ivory Coast to our hearts, embracing a compassionate and sustainable approach that benefits all involved. Together we can make a difference and savor the taste of change. Thank you for watching.